Hello everyone. I think today I need to reiterate exactly why this channel exists and why I decided to start doing this. Really the root cause of this channel, but also of many of the issues with the world. I've thought about this a few different ways how to go over it, but I'm just going to basically say it. We live in a nuclear world where, if you listen to the ex-KGB agent Yuri Brezhnov, he says essentially, because the two world superpowers knew they couldn't use their most powerful weapons on each other and knew they couldn't conduct conventional all-out warfare, it resulted in a series of, proxy wars, but also in a series of propaganda wars. So when I see things that are deviations of nature, and not just, oh, this person is being silly or whatever, but when there is a very clear and distinct mental illness that is not being treated as an illness, when someone is obviously in a negative state of mind and we say, well, that's fine, it's all relative and this is actually what they want. When we see things that disagree with us on such a basic natural level, when we see abominations of nature, and there doesn't seem to be a discernible reason why they exist, the answer which I've come to at many junctures is that this is the product of the next generation of warfare, which is information and propaganda warfare, completely asymmetrical in its nature, which means that one type of propaganda or one type of attack is not going to look anything like the other. You did have this in World War II and pretty much any war, honestly. But in World War II, I forget which side did which, I'm pretty sure both sides did, but sometimes planes would fly overhead and instead of dropping bombs, they would drop leaflets showing depictions or letters talking about how, the enemy was doomed to triumph, or that even if they won, their countries would be betrayed. Any sort of psychological trick to demoralize and dehumanize the enemy force and make them stop fighting or use their own insecurities of their nation against them were used. And even though we live in peacetime right now, the tactics that are employed against our nation and the world have not really changed, and they've only amplified, even though we may not seem we are at war. And it's a constant sort of reminder that every war really starts because of an underlying psychological or economic conflict. And I believe this war isn't just being waged between countries, but between classes. And it's a very tired, old story that the ruling class will try to divide and conquer the lower classes so that they are easier to rule. I know that's a cliche, but it really is true. If everyone is divided and fighting amongst each other, there can be no unifying force and figure out exactly who's really screwing them over. but it also goes into other countries. So when I see things in the media that I know are unnatural, I often am inclined to think it is the residual or the continued USSR KGB program or a Chinese CCCP program aimed at demoralizing the enemy nation. And the way they do this is by, one, attacking the identity and demoralizing it, and two, by using a form of psychological judo. And as Yuri describes, in judo, if you have a much larger opponent, you do not go against him. You do not even go for his weak points. Instead, you take his weight and his strength and you encourage it and you use it against him and pull him into a position where you are able to flip him and imbalance him using the things he already values. And in a nation like America, some of the greatest Enlightenment values live there, such as self-determination, self-reliance, independence, and the control of the people rather than the control of the government or a king or a monarch or a dictator. When I see a person or a group of people who are asserting their freedoms over the freedoms of others, or asserting their victimhood over others, I am filled with the question whether or not their ideas are natural or if they have been implanted by covert agents using covert strategies that these people do not even fully understand. And as Yuri has often said, that the main areas of penetration or injection were, of course, the government to get spies in, and besides that, the universities to essentially propagate and legitimize these delusions and these illnesses, which would in turn destroy the social fabric of the country who is their target country. Now, many of you are maybe wondering what this has to do with a spirituality and religion channel. One of my favorite passages is Matthew 6:22. The way I used to view religion was a psychological crutch, and the way I view it now as a psychological telescope or a lens in which all things become clear and everything can be filled with light. Essentially, this war of the psyche, and psyche is a Greek word which means mind, the war of the minds and of really the zeitgeist of the people, is such that it ties very much into the religious aspect, because the religion, for all intents and purposes, in every culture and every time frame, is about mental health. And apparently we have a mental health pandemic around the world now that everyone's abandoned religion, surprisingly. I think more so than ever, you need to understand that your mind and your soul are under attack. That the next wave of warfare does not discriminate between civilians and soldiers. It is an all-out propaganda war and a spiritual war. One in which the Chinese communists, the Russians, the whoever has a bone to pick with your country is going to employ tactics to destroy your soul and your mind. Which is why this channel exists, and why I am telling you now, more than ever, you specifically, to put on the armor of God. Not because it is just a point of peace of mind and of enlightenment and of self-fulfillment, but you must put on the armor of God because we are at war. And you are standing out in the field wearing nothing. So you must put on this armor, not because it is just pleasurable and self-fulfilling to do so, but because it is necessary. If I had known what I knew 7, 8 years ago, I would have saved myself a lot of trouble and trauma and overthinking. And I would have also saved myself from, well, I did save myself from making a couple very bad mistakes that I would have regretted for the rest of my life. And it really does hit me how bad things are. If you look at the world in the context that especially China wants to destroy the soul and the mind of the West and of its enemy nations, I look at TikTok and I look at the content that's promoted there, and I look at the debasement that occurs. And allegedly, I haven't seen it for myself, but apparently, local Chinese TikTok, where they have it, it's all educational videos and, whatever. And how do you do this? How do you compute that? How do you do this? And it's like America has fallen asleep with its dull entertainment, and there's just this monsoon of, I don't want to say misinformation, but information that is just fluffy. It doesn't make you think. It doesn't make you a better person. It is just popcorn and soft blankets. And those are two very nice things, but to be more aware and more radical, I invite you to use this opportunity to sharpen your mind against this. And if you are a person who looks around and you say, you know what, I'm not really all about this. If you feel like Ryan Gosling in Drive, where he looks around and the world around him is just a garbage place where people are taking more and more pills to create the delusion that it's not a garbage place and just ignore it, you're not alone. And I don't expect you to turn to the Bible and say, oh yeah, that's the solution, because I don't think I've ever been to a church that resonated with the Bible. And it depends on how deep you want to go on this, but I think to a large extent, every single church repeats the political message of the day. They all reinforce the social political message, which is this weird amalgamation where finance and banking and politics and every institution that exists are all conforming to the same mindset, which is so odd because the church is supposed to be founded on a book and a story and the teachings thereof. And you open that book and you read it, and it ain't what they're talking about. It's similar, definitely some of the stories, but for me, reading the Bible is entirely different from going to church. It's not even, and I've heard a lot of interpretations that will make your mind just spin. Like, oh, was Jesus really angry when he threw up those tables? Because we're supposed to have a nice Jesus, a calm, peaceful Jesus that never gets angry. And I'm like, yeah, you might want to read the book your religion is based on first, then getting into the religion, and then making the book fit what you thought you knew. And that was part of my experience, that I thought I knew what was in this book, and I did. But the how and the why things happen were very different from what I expected. And it is kind of an experience to read it without context, without expectations. But in any case, I wouldn't, if you do need to read the Bible, you don't have to read the whole thing, because I haven't even read all of it. I've read maybe half of it at this point, but you should, to get the most basic experience, I would read Genesis and Matthew. That's the first book of the Old Testament and the first book of the New Testament. And I can give you pretty much what you need. And everything else on from that is a bit more esoteric and difficult to understand and, well, interesting if you have an interest. Have a scholarly mind, I guess. You've seen church on TV and you just don't connect with it at all. I totally understand that, because I'm pretty much exactly the same way, and yet here I am. So what I want you to do is to just understand that all this chaos, all of these deviations, all of these distractions, debasements, and things that don't agree with your heart, with your gut, with the natural order of things, they make more sense if you understand that we are in a worldwide culture and propaganda war. And the solution is to find that sense of self again, to find that foundation which created your country, my country, and most countries in the West were founded on Christianity. And to understand it not in the modern Christian context, which is the global let's hold hands and get together, but in what the book actually says. And to discover that you have a personal relationship with a higher power. You have a special power within you to perceive the world. You're a living, breathing composition of ever-changing cells and electromagnetic ideas that can shape your own perception of the world and judge it and carry out actions within it. And that you're here for a reason. You don't think that. But you can't look at the scope of your life in an instant. And until you do, you can start to find the reason and the pattern of why you're here. And once you discover that higher identity, that higher spirit, maybe it's through Christianity, maybe it's through something else, but as long as you identify that you have something unique within you and that you're not a bad person because propaganda and the media or the TV say so, you are going to be able to just reject all of the nonsense, and you'll be able to see what is real and what is a lie. And that goes back to one of the oldest religions in history, which is Zoroastrianism. It was the forces of truth versus the forces of lies. The light and the darkness. And what they want to do is to create the whole world in an overcast sky and make you forget that you have the light within you. And to allow the shadows nibble away and destroy your soul unabated. Even if you do get consumed, you can always come back. If you find that light, you can burn away the darkness that has consumed you. And you can be reborn. It's not hard, but you need to know that you found the true light. And it's a journey everyone goes on. And again, I just wanted to give a socio-economic, political explanation for why you might want to explore your spirituality. Because now more than ever, you need to awaken. You need to arm yourself for the spiritual battle that is going on right now. Because if you don't, you'll just be another casualty. Another tragedy, another sad story. And I'd like to stop that from happening. And I want as many people as possible to find their true self and their true light. True light. Anyway, I think that's it. I hope this made sense to you and it resonated with your heart. And if not, I'm just a crazy YouTube guy. But until next time, please take care of yourself. God bless. Take care.